before we just unveil or showcase the mural. And that led us to having this thought-provoking conversation, which not only is with our leaders here, but we want to hear from you all in our audience today. So thank you to Wintrust for that gift that this mural will be here for the next 2 months. And also I want to give a quick shout out to all of the ACE staff, the team members who worked so diligently to put today together and all the other many activities and programs that we have year round. If you could please stand up for me. Make sure you haven't connected with any, and you are connecting with them. And thank you to each and every one of you for joining us for this conversation. We are thrilled to share our commitment to what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ensuring that we are showcasing a mural that's more than just art, but really representing our ongoing commitment as an organization since 1982 to advancing the careers of Latinos, of underrepresented groups, in spaces and into leadership positions, especially in these challenging times. Why the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion in a time and place that we are in now? We want to make sure that we are creating awareness, education on what DEI is and what it isn't. We've seen research, the Washington Post recently indicated that there's an increase of support to DEI when you support share awareness on what it is. Increase from 60% to 70% of folks that indicated they support diversity, equity, and inclusion after they were made aware as to what it is. And diversity, I'll start with that. I think for us, it's important to share that everyone is diverse. It's not just a race-based, it's not just gender. There's so many facets to what diversity is: ability, thought, preferences, and that everyone is included when it comes to that terminology. I think that it's also imperative that we stop saying that diverse person, because everyone is diverse, and really creating awareness in terms of what it is and what it isn't. Equity, one that's near and dear to my heart, for various reasons, but I consider myself a product of equity. Programs, services, supports that met me where I was, either as a student, with financial support, either as with programming, that really helped me understand my awareness to my own capabilities, but met me where I am. And I'll share an example. If you can picture, I was just sitting in on a session where many of you may be familiar with one of our longtime diversity, equity, inclusion leaders, Tyrone Studemeyer, where he put on the screen bicycles. And when you think of a bike and being able, from an equity lens, ensure that everyone has a bike, you have to think about what type of bike are you going to give a 5-year-old versus a 6'8" man versus the one that perhaps cannot walk. And that is an example of equity and being able to provide that level playing field so that everyone can enjoy a bike. So think about what that means for you. And inclusion is ensuring everyone feels heard and valued, and that's embedded in cultures and everyday environments. And how are we ensuring that we're building that type of space? And so reframing the rhetoric starts with each and every one of us. And we want to encourage that with this conversation, we are supporting one another with that together. Right now, we are facing concerning trends such as significant reduction in DEI initiatives across many organizations. Recent data shows a 44% drop in DEI-related job postings by mid-2023. And again, it reinforces our need to continue to push forward. I want to also level set that here at HACE, we are not endorsing any political party. We are sharing awareness, we are creating education on what is at stake as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is at stake when it pertains to organizations like HACE, ourselves represented here, and many others. And I'll share one example, an anti-DEI project that's called Project 2025. An anti-DEI that from beginning to end of its nearly 1,000 pages is a plan designed to roll back many initiatives that have become integral to our workspaces and communities. And I'll cite two sources that have done one policy implications by Harvard Business Review projects a 20% decrease in available resources for training and support, which could exacerbate the existing disparities that exist, the gaps. And the challenges and risks that we're looking at, according to the Brookings Institute, proposed changes in Project 2025 could result in fewer scholarships, grants for students, which would hinder educational and professional development opportunities. We've also seen the affirmative action on admissions that's happened in higher education. And recently, we've already seen the impact of that, where MIT recently published that they went from a class of having 25 Black and Latino and Native students to a class of 15%. The first class that was impacted. That's a dramatic decrease. That will follow suit in corporate America, in workplaces, if these trends continue the way that they do. So, with that, I want to say, we're proud of a lot of the work that we're leading to drive this move forward. And I'm very proud of the work that these amazing leaders are doing in their own organizations and driving this work forward. And so I want to start off by us getting to know who's here. And then we'll jump into a couple of questions that we have, and then we'll ask you to have your questions prepared for us to engage in dialogue, not just here in person, but I know we also have folks that are joining us virtually as well. And so I'll ask Carlos to start us, kick us off. You can introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background, and how you got to working.
Yeah, thank you. You got me thinking about Project 2025. So thank you. So Carlos Herrera, he, him pronoun, based in Chicago, lead our DEI efforts for Ryan Specialty. Ryan Specialty is an international specialty insurance firm. I've been,
predominantly Mexican immigrant community. Spanish is my first language, even though I was born in the United States. And I've been the first from my family, many firsts, the first to graduate from high school, college, to get a master's degree. During my graduation from college, I decided to go east, and I found my way in Washington, D.C., where I started my career in the labor movement, working at SEIU. So I bleed purple, and there I worked on many campaigns. But the one that had the most impact in my professional career is the Immigrant Rights Campaign, where we got really close to passing immigration reform back in 2013. And I was part of the Fast for Families. I don't know if you all remember that campaign. We were in a tent right in front of the Capitol, and all kinds of powerful people were coming to visit to see the fasteners. And that, when it didn't pass, that really had an impact on myself and my team, but it really propelled me to, in a way, leave the labor movement and focus more on the Latino community, on civic participation, because the reason why it didn't pass is because we didn't have a Congress that could make it a reality. And it could have impacted 11 million families across the United States, many including my own. So I've been in the civic space for over a decade now, and working still on immigration, on environment, on economic justice. And interesting story, I actually heard about HACE in DC, Mujeres de HACE. And these are all the badasses, Latinas, political operatives, and I want to be part of it. And I'm really bummed I didn't get to do it, but there's still hope for me. But I with all these ladies, the network that was built, and that's very important because I was raised in a very hardworking family. They encouraged higher education. Unfortunately, they didn't encourage voting at an early age, not because they didn't care, but because they themselves didn't vote and they couldn't participate in our democracy. But it has instilled a very immigrant work ethic that I'm very proud to follow in my parents' footsteps. And in 2019, that propelled us, myself and a group of other individuals, to found Por el Latinx, a civic and social justice organization dedicated to building political power for the Latino community to win on economic, environmental, and immigrant justice. And we're right now in 6 states: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Washington, California, and Texas. And we're not in the lovely state of Illinois yet, but we are considered a national organization, and we touch a little bit of all the states. And our focus is building power for our community, making sure that we're not an afterthought, but we are a priority. We're at the forefront of every conversation. So I'm very honored to be here along with these leaders here. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you. We're honored to have you. We have Anna Mock, President, founder of Ascend Leadership. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hailing from San Francisco here. I got in yesterday, so I'm probably 2 hours earlier. This is usually when I'm sitting in a hot room doing hot yoga. So it's funny, on the car ride here, the driver asks, "Is your air conditioned in that building? It's really hot today." Oh, don't worry, I can handle it. But it's not. Thank you for this beautiful space. Anna Mock, as mentioned, from San Francisco, co-founder of Ascend. A little bit about myself and the organization. Ascend is a Pan-Asian leadership organization. We call ourselves a career lifecycle organization. So we have programs all the way from the person getting the first job and helping them in college through scholarships and some of our other support programs, to also a corporate board directors network. Because we believe each generation of workers and leaders need to be paying back and supporting the generation behind it. But also we all can learn from the younger generations to make sure we are keeping contemporary relevance. So it's a very dynamic network. We have our membership network, but also with the foundation. We do a lot of research on the issue of advancement and inclusion. And some of that research actually includes not just Asians, but looking at Black Hispanics and other groups. We have a core principle about doing this work together. If you believe in certain theories about race or certain theories about society, there's things in the ecosystem that divide us as communities. And it's really important to find what's common in our work. And that leads me to my self-introduction. I too am a first-generation college student. My family hails from the Asia Pacific and Hong Kong, where I was born. My family is from southern China, and I was a baby on that plane ride over that big vast ocean and landed in San Francisco. So as a child of immigrants, myself, the work that other communities, not only Asians, experience is near and dear to my heart. Parents that barely made ends meet. We were latchkey children. My brother and I kind of self-raised, but with a lot of love and care from our parents, even though they weren't always there in the morning to make us breakfast. And that in itself, I think, makes us really strong as a community. First gen into the corporate environment, I was the first person of Chinese descent to be, woman of Chinese descent to be promoted to partner at Deloitte. And that leads to actually the founding of Ascend. There was a few of us that were sitting in these companies, and we were graduating from colleges in the 80s in record numbers, Asians. But then kind of fast forward a few decades, and we looked around our own companies, we looked around our clients, we looked around companies, and I said, why is it we were the first and there's still so few? I would walk into boardrooms and say, why am I, as a new partner, the only person of color in this room? And people thought I was the person serving tea and not more. And that still happens. Less so today, but once in a while still happens. It's just not to know that experience. So that's led me to, I call myself an accidental advocate or accidental activist, because really I had a very long corporate career and I still am running in parallel to the work we're doing with Ascend. But it's pretty clear when you come from roots like ours that it's really important to use those spaces to say something and do something that benefits all. And I think that comes from my mom, who didn't ever have much. She died when I was in college, but she always found a way to give back in her way. And so I think each of us here and each of us in this room are trying to find a way to make society a better place. And I'm a strong believer in optimism. Anything, and in fact, if you see my personal email, it's rose glasses. He's another coach who told me that was both a strength, that's something I have to manage for. So I do show up in the world with a fair amount of optimism. And I want to believe that society is a great place and it's made up of great people. And I think it's really important, especially when times seem like there's a lot of dust on those glasses, that we remember with optimism so we can do the work that is really important to continue to do. So that's really a bit about myself and our organization, about how we look at work and the work of transcending perhaps all the noise that we have to deal with every day to execute on our daily jobs. Thank you. Welcome.
And Karen Freeman Wilson, our Chicago Urban League President and CEO.
Well, good morning. So I am probably in more ways than one the OG of the panel, and so excited to be here. Patricia called me, I think, when I was planning my daughter's wedding, and she's like, "We've got to have you on this panel," and I was like, "Okay, I'll call you." She said, no, you got to give me an answer. And I am so glad that the answer was yes, because it is an honor to be with all of you here on the panel and in the room. I was listening to everyone's journey and thought about my own. So I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and on a clear day, if you're on the lakeshore, you can see across to Gary, and the first thing you see, of course, are the steel mills. I am a child of steel. Kara is in here. She is a Gary native as well. So shout out to GI. And in growing up, Gary had some of the best public schools in the country because steel was booming, right, in the 60s, really 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so I had a unique opportunity when I graduated in 1978 to go to Harvard University. And so the summer before going, and you all remember this from going to school, you learn who your roommates are, right? And they write each other. And so my roommates wrote me. And one of my roommates said, I'm going to be rowing group. And I had no idea what that was. So I went to the dictionary and learned that that was boat, right? And I was like, I am really trouble. But I get to Harvard, and as many people do when they go to a place that is very, very different, I found my group. It wasn't a routine, although my roommate and I got along and still correspond to this day. But what I learned was because of the opportunities created by a really good public school system, I was able to thrive at Harvard. I was able to thrive at Harvard Law School, and ultimately came back to Gary and became the mayor of my hometown. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about DEI, right? It's really creating opportunity. And how many of you want to have opportunities but don't want anybody else to help, right? We all want people to have opportunities. And I think as we lead with that, then it makes a lot more sense. It's sort of the difference between Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. Everybody wants the Affordable Care Act. Very few or some people don't want Obamacare. And so I think about the Chicago Urban League and the work that we do and how we were founded. So we were founded out of the Great Migration from Mississippi, from Louisiana, where my dad came from, Mississippi, where my grandparents, my mother's grandparents came from, they came to Gary, but there were many people coming from all points south to Chicago. And when folks when they got here, they were trying to get acclimated. Housing, education, business, workforce. And the Urban League helped people to settle in. We started that over 170 years ago. And what I always tell folks is that we are still helping Black folks get settled today. What we understand is that we can't do that in the past. We have to work with ourselves. We have to work with ASEAN. We have to work with CLARE and so many other organizations. And sometimes, because we are pushed towards this set-aside mentality, right? That it's only 10%, that it's only 20%. And I'm like, well, what about that 90? And what about that 80? And so I reject that siloed mentality. I think we have to work as allies. I think we have to work cooperatively. And that is why I think it's important that we have these conversations so that people will understand. The last thing that I will say is I think it's important to use the Mural as an opportunity to drive this conversation. I want to give a shout out to Wintrust, who does this throughout the year. You didn't have to do like I did for our mural, which was stop on the side of the highway and really, to risk life and limb. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you, Karen. We're excited to have you. You have the mic in terms of, you talked a little bit about what's at stake as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion, the need to politically mobilize in terms of ensuring people practice their civic leadership and engagement. Karen, what would you say in terms of the Chicago Urban League is meeting with amidst the broader DEI decline? What measures have been or are necessary, whether it's for your organization or for folks to consider, to reinforce these efforts?
So our 2 points, or our 2 North Stars, I guess it's really one North Star, there are 2 vantage points are eradicating institutional racism and reducing the racial wealth gap. And we say that that is important, not just for Black people, not just for others who are underserved, but it's important so that everybody can contribute to the GDP, right? So that we can all have more. And we do that in a variety of ways. First, we do it by casting the vote. We are a major convener, largely for the Black community, but for all communities. In fact, we are doing a series of discussions around the connection between the Great Migration that occurred in the early 1900s and what we are seeing in migration right now, and why there shouldn't be a conflict, right? And how we bridge that conflict. But also we do that through the creation of business opportunities, through the creation of good paying jobs. Because it's not just getting a job, it's getting a
Make the
job,
parcel that this guy
it's
is.
educational opportunities, programming and education.
You just put just move it so that it's a corner, so she can kind of scroll over a little bit. Just scroll over.
But we have also one of the premier research and policy centers in the Black community where we talk about not only what the problem is, but what the solutions are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. And so Anna, to you on that, does anybody have anything to add? Feel free. We want to make this conversational because we have so much questions. You've demonstrated obviously your commitment to community, fostering equitable and inclusive society. What would you add in terms of what are some strategies for organizations to consider during these times?
Right now, I think there's a lot of concern, right, about the pullback, we were talking about that, or about continued investment. What we're seeing from the SEM standpoint, we work with hundreds of companies, mostly large corporates are both donors and supporters, and we just hosted one of our largest conventions. We are not seeing, at least immediately, I would say, overt reduction in terms of the commitment to us and some of our partner organizations. What we are seeing is companies needing to think about how public they want to be about their work, really challenging, right? Looking at maybe the work through a much more legal risk lens than ever before. Not that they didn't, they always did, but now even more so. And thinking about what type of public response. And keep in mind, companies are getting pulled on all sides. They're getting letters from, different agencies saying, you're not doing enough, or you're doing too much, etc. So most organizations are walking this very tightrope, which I'm sure you can talk more about, right? How do we balance all of that and recognize the broad constituents? And I think that's even more complicated when organizations are global. Because if they have operations in Europe and EU, those legislative bodies actually have different types of mandates, right, that they also need to think about. So the work is not getting any easier, but what we are seeing is it always goes back to culture and commitment. So if the company's board, if its CEO and its executive team is really understanding what is DEI, what is the core outcome of what is desired to be, and it's not about putting numbers on the board, it's about the real impact of the culture of the company. I think those companies are the ones that are continue to do all the good work and continue to do it. They may not do it as publicly. They may do it in a way that again helps manage, right, the different risks. And we always talk about this at the end of the day, right? It's employees know when the workplace is one that really helps them thrive and helps them really feel like they belong. Right? If you ask them, they will tell you that. And if you ask, if you have children in your household or in your family that are in the workplace, or they know they talk to each other. On the issue, I want to build on this discussion of economic advancement and empowerment. That is also a core principle of Ascend. We don't necessarily use the words about closing the wealth gap because that's different meanings for different community. But we strongly believe if you can help people get to that next level of whatever it is that gives them a degree of financial security and meets the needs that they have, they in turn, and we evangelize this in our mission, and we get our members to go back into the communities, the local communities, and do work. So it's not about, let's make my bank account bigger and let's get a bigger house when we talk about wealth and economic advancement. It's about what do you do with then whatever you've created as assets, and how do you use those assets and that knowledge and that position to give back to others and to support others. So I think that principle is still such an important principle for all of us, and many organizations, right, I think have that belief. And I think if companies think about that as it relates to the context of how they help their employees thrive and contribute more, they'll have such a loyal employment base that will in turn work so hard for the good of the company and drive up the value of the company. And ultimately, that's what gets measured, right? If you are essentially a public company, or is there value creation that your employees and the platform is creating?
Lots of great points made here, and on the wealth piece, also with HACE programs, there's a financial sessions and awareness that happens in some of the programs for that reason, right? To ensure that we're equipping and providing those resources. When you look at our communities, right, their economic contributions are immense, and when
parties, we endorse our issues. So if the candidate's in favor for our issues, we make sure that the community is informed in the same way. If, example, Project 2025 would be detrimental to many communities and the Latino community. We're talking about mass deportations. We're talking about elimination of the education department. There's like so many things packed in this blueprint that is set to be the Republican agenda for the first 100 days. That is very alarming, and Poder Latinx, along with other organizations, have come together. We formed a coalition called Latinos Against Project 2025, which I invite all you to get engaged, because we need to inform our families, we need to inform our communities of the harms of what is at stake here, because the stakes are very high. And I would say on the year-round engagement, when we say we register, we educate folks on the platforms and the issues, and get people out to vote for the final stretch of every election. So it's not just every 4 years, every 2 years, but every election. And post November 5th, there will be more elections in 2025 that will decide the makeup of local elected officials that have so much power in our daily lives. I would say that some of the challenges besides Project 2025 that we're experiencing and seeing were in many key states, voter purchase that are specifically targeting Black and Brown. Many Spanish surnames are seen on these lists. We're also seeing the attacks on a lot of groups like Poder Latinx when it comes to voter registration efforts. There has been legislation recently passed that would penalize us for doing voter registration or prohibit DACA, TPS, even green card holders from performing voter registration even within their own family. So the fear of our political power is reflected, and we see that with how some states respond. So for the Latinx, we continue doing what we know how to do, and that is through an integrated voter engagement approach, engage the community in a cultural, linguistic, with folks on the ground that are native to the area, that are engaged every day, live it, and we're very proud to say that leadership development is very important. A lot of our folks are young, new in the civic space in leadership, and that is something that we need to continue. And again, HACE is one of those partners that we envision with our Poderosa Fellowship program, continue building that pipeline, not just for Latinas, but for all Latinos, because we need more leadership in the civic space.
Absolutely, all across the board. Thank you, Gabby. And there's also research out there that showcases that employees want their corporations to encourage them to be civically engaged. And so there's a lot of resources that are out there that also, that's an imperative for employee engagement to ensure you're supporting that. Carlos, as a longtime DEI leader, now is your fairly new role, Vice President of DEI role at what would you say you've witnessed in terms of the shifts? And let me just pause here and ask the audience, how many of you would consider yourself a DEI practitioner in this space? By a show of hands. Thank you. How many of you are supporting these initiatives at your workplace or involved in also? Awesome, thank you for sharing. And then you, Carlos, what would you say that considering, what the conversations, what strategies are you recommending for organizations to continue to sustain and advance DEI efforts? We were talking, some of us amongst the recent announcements, and I was saddened to see, and I called Carlos about this yesterday, mostly tourism. One of our companies that are headquartered here in our very own backyards, yesterday, put a statement on retracting DEI supplier diversity efforts, among others. I don't know all of the details. I obviously could not get a hold of my contact yesterday, but for being a longtime partner of ASET and many organizations here locally, we are concerned, and I talked to many of those leaders, and we want to be able to either provide a letter or a statement as to what harm can be done as a result of that. And I know why perhaps these messages are coming out, and perhaps they're still doing the work internally, but that's harmful still, regardless. So, Carlos, your thoughts?
Well, I have a Quite a few thoughts actually.
You said we were gonna
first,
boycott, no
every-
more MGDs or.
Well, a couple things first. First, to everyone that raised their hand to Patricia's question about DEI, thank you, right? For those of you that didn't, we need to talk after, we'll identify how you can support DEI. Everyone's hand should have been up because everyone has a role in it, right? It's not just the DEI team that should be doing this stuff, it's everyone. In the firm, outside the firm, organizations, associations, schools, everyone has an opportunity to participate and be involved in this. So it just doesn't lie on those DEI professionals. The second thing I want to talk about before I get to my question is I think if you solve economic disparities, I think a lot of this discussion changes, right? And actually, when I think about that, I think about supplier diversity and kind of what you just shared and kind of what you were talking about a little bit. Like supplier diversity is a great way to impact the economy. And actually, John Rogers calls it business diversity because that's how we should be thinking about it because all these different vendors can impact the business, right? And for those companies that decide, we're not going to focus on supplier diversity, that's going to be huge. And if that catches on, that's going to hurt a lot. We can't let that happen, right? We're lucky that, 2 years, when they brought me on board, they didn't have a program at all. And one of the first things they said is, hey, how's our supplier diversity program? They're like, we don't have one. I'm lucky that our procurement team is like all over, right? They're so supportive of our DEI efforts that we're making ways in getting there, right? So we just can't let that die. It has just such a big economic impact. So your question, a couple of things. Karen, you mentioned you're an OG, right? And I see Pam here, I see Murray here. They've been in this DEI space for a long time. I think when DEI first started, it was about compliance, right? Kind of had to do it. And then it was about representation. And then it was about people counting, right? And then it was about bringing yourself to work. And then 2020 happened, George Floyd murder, stop, right? Like everyone had to really think about what are we going to do? What's going on? What do we want to do? And a lot of companies and a lot of leaders were doing things, whether they wanted to or not. They had to do something. And we go along the years, and some of those organizations did a lot of good things, and then some of those organizations talked a lot of good things, right? They didn't do anything. And then we get to the point of affirmative action ruling, and that just opened the door. It opened the door for those leaders and companies like, hey, we can exit this now, right? We don't have to do this now. We were forced to in 2020, so that's what we're seeing, right? So people's true colors are coming out. So, so be it, that's your true colors, and just let people know so people know if they're going to want to work with you. People know if they're going to do business with you, right? I think that what's needed is that you really need to have a good partnership and relationship with your leadership team, executive team, and your board. Like you can't do anything in an organization without that. And when you're talking about DEI, like people right out of school, they get DEI. You go to universities and colleges right now, like they're doing it, like they're voicing themselves, they're working with each other, trying to figure this out. It's people that have been leading a lot of these organizations for a long time. Like this is I don't want to say a new concept, a concept we need to learn more about, right? And that's fine. Let's learn. I'm there to support you. I'm there to partner with you in this space. So that's what we do, and that's why I'm very happy to do that with our leadership team. It's not just reporting. It's like you have to have them engaged, right? You have to have their support. In the time that I've been there, I don't think I've had anyone tell me no yet. But then also, so it's also important to understand, like, I'm not running the Carlos Herrera agenda of DEI at the firm, right? I'm running what works for and what our firm needs in DEI for our firm, right? And a lot of people get it because it's just important. And you need someone to actually lead it. You can't have someone that's going to lead this and something else. I call that cheating. I think you need someone to do this 100% of the time. I think you need to provide the tools and the resources. We were lucky to actually just hire someone about a month ago to expand our team. We're lucky to have the tools and resources that were provided to us to do the work that we needed to do. So I'm very, very happy with that. I also think too, with us, inclusion is a value of our firm. And I think companies' values say a lot about them. So whenever anyone's looking for a new job, like, see what their values say. I'd be interested in these firms or these companies that go back on DEI. If they have DEI in their values, if they take that off. Like that sends a big message, right? But I'm lucky that we have it. We also have innovation as a value, right? You're not going to get innovation without diversity of thought. You're not going to get diversity of thought without diversity of experience, right? It all kind of goes together. Courage is another value of our firm. And the space right now is not for the weak. We gotta voice ourselves. I know we talked about yesterday, there's some individuals that are like, yeah, I can't really talk about this right now, I gotta say this. But this is the time to talk. You probably know this more than anyone else. This is the time to talk about it. We have to talk about it. And to the other points that were made before, like, I would love our communities to come together, right? The Asian community, Black community, LGBT community, women and gender neutral community, people with disabilities. I would love that to be great. We all working together, doing things together. But that's not gonna happen until our community gets our act together. Our community does not have our act together. We're so against each other. We call ourselves Hispanic, Latino, you're this country, you're that country. Like, we gotta get ourselves together and united and supporting each other in order to provide value, whatever partnership we bring, right? And that's what we need to do. That's why I wanted to do this, to say that let's do this here. And for those of you not in Chicago, bring it to your city. But in Chicago, let's get it going, right? Like, this is what we need to do. Don't just come here, listen, go out. Like, come here, do something. Interact with someone that you haven't talked to. Get to know them, because that's the only way that we can actually come together and make an actual impact. It's about impact right now. No more talking, no more doing this, doing that, low-hanging fruit. No, let's actually make a difference. Because right now we need it. And coming November, depending how it goes, we're gonna need it even more, right? So just that's what I had to share.
Do something. On that piece, and we'll ask from each of you if we can share an action and a recommendation, and then we'll open it up for questions out in the audience in terms of anything you want to add in terms of why it's crucial for organizations to continue to invest, supports, or any recommendations for an individual that they can do within their own respective roles and organizations. Want me to start? Yeah.
I would say that our organization is a little different. Well, the Latinx is 100% Latinx, and diverse from very different backgrounds, different groups, gender, LGBTQ, immigrants. However, we do work with a lot of different institutions where we clearly see DEI being a factor whether we receive a grant, if we get the right communication, the right outreach to the community. And DEI is extremely important in government, in all institutions of power. So we continue to push, and yes, similar to what you said, Patricia, we did experience generosity during George Floyd when the protests were happening. Many of our partners, Black-led organizations, received generous grants, and then they stopped. And it was detrimental because we built programs on this. We built a lot of expectations for our community, for our organizations, and having the funding stop, it is detrimental to the movement. Many movements, many issues, many fights, definitely civic engagement. So what I would ask you all to help us is that we need to have these conversations with our families. We need to have our conversations with our loved ones. We have to participate. We cannot sit this one out. I know we say this every single election. This is the most consequential election of our lifetimes, but we really mean it. We really, really mean it. There's so much at stake for a variety of issues. DEI is like one of so many more that we would be going backwards, and we can't afford to go backwards. We have so much progress to do. So those conversations are gonna be key. Ensuring people are registered. We have a big problem in the Latino community. Almost 40% in all of the major Latino dense states 40% is the unregistered percentage. Some states is even higher. So for us to close that voter registration gap, we need to ensure they're registered and even check we're registered, because remember, these purges don't really, work really hard to let you know you've been unregistered, you're no longer in the voter file. So we have to do double diligence here, making sure that we're registered and getting people out to vote. I think everyone here knows at least 5 people. Every vote is gonna count. We just saw in Arizona, an election was called on 39 votes. 39 votes, and you know what everyone says? That's like my family. I hope all of them went to vote. So we cannot allow any vote to be wasted. We cannot allow the couch to win over democracy, over our community's best interest. We need to vote, and we need everyone here to just help us amplify, register, and get those folks out.
to vote.
Thank you.
Definitely echo what both of you have said. Adding to it, I think there is the reality that there's a lot of fatigue right now. And so it is incumbent on us, especially if we're kind of in the fourth quarter of the year, summer's kind of over, this whole DEI discussion, and everything seems like it's so heavy. I think each of us need to make sure we are recharging for the work and also know it's a long game. It's not a short game, right? How we got to as a nation in our companies, in our communities did not happen overnight. And we're probably not gonna change it overnight, there's gonna be a lot of bumps along the way. And it's kind of a mindset about keeping that, otherwise pretty easy, we can all kind of just retrench, right back to when you first stepped on the Harvard day. It would be easy just to go back to what's comfortable, but what's comfortable is not gonna be what makes us a better nation and a better community. So I think every day finding our network of friends within this room to just be able to use those soundings and recharge when you're having a bad day. And then I think also, I do have a lot of hope. I have a lot of 20-somethings in my life. And I do think the younger generation grew up so differently about what is acceptable and what's not. And we need to use that voice and that power to make sure that momentum for making us much more inclusive of a society where everyone belongs. We should not waste that, right? We should need that. We should figure a way how to harness all of that energy and thoughts and creativity they have to do things differently. And know that they have solutions that many of us in this room might not have even thought about. And how do we tap into that?
So, I wanna put a, emphasis or exclamation point behind the civic engagement piece. And I wanna do it this way, because you talked about the likelihood that less than half of the registered voters will vote. So I'm not a mathematician, but I know that that means that in every room that we are in, including this one, that means that a lot of folks won't vote. So we really do have to be intentional as it relates to this and every election with ourselves and with those that we care about. So have a family Zoom call, right? Our family gets together every month on Zoom, and it's folks from all over the country. And we have door prizes, and we give back to school gifts, and we give Grandparents' Day gifts, and we dance, we do it all, have a ball. But trust that our September and October meetings are going to talk about voting. And not just voting, but having a voting plan. The other thing that I will say is in 2020, because everyone saw the 8 minutes that rung across the world involving George Floyd's murder, we were all called to action. Companies had days where they were being thoughtful and reflective. Well, here's what I'll say. Folks, particularly Black folks, are still dying at the hands of the police. It took less than a minute for a Springfield or a county officer in Springfield to literally kill Sonia Massey, execute her. And so there should not be any less of a sense of urgency. But people have become so accustomed to that. So it's up to us to make sure that they are not comfortable when it comes to incidents and those things that should move us to act.
Thank you. Carlos, what would you like?
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, DEI is about people, right? And if you don't care about people, then I can see why you don't care about DEI. It's very important, and I think that, 2040, people of color made the majority of this country. The future's heading that way. I mean, it's not gonna go anywhere, so let's do something to actually make it worth impact and value and provide value. The other thing I'll share is, it's interesting that your family gets together and Zoom and talk about it. I think you're right. You said, you should talk about it with your family. I think that's absolutely right. How hard are these discussions with our families? I mean, we don't even want to talk about like generational trauma, mental health, right? Like we don't even want to talk about politics, but you know what? You're right. We need to lean into our discomfort and talk about this stuff, right? So the next carne asada, like get at it and start talking about this, because that's how we're going to move things forward. So
And
that's
thank you, Carlos. And that's my hope with this conversation, is that we are providing that support, that inspiration, so that if you haven't had those conversations with those in your circle, that once maybe you're texting them right now, or after this, that you're running out and having those conversations, because it's so critical. And I know confrontation or these are tough conversations, but I always say, lean into your why. Why did you choose to show up today? Why did you choose to do the work that you do? And leverage that as fuel to have those courageous conversations that are needed so much more now than ever. And to your comments, I don't think these conversations are being had enough, which is my hope is that you can go back and share or have this or create a platform as this, whatever is at your disposal, to have a similar conversation. Let us know how we can support you with that, and to those that are tuning in as well. So at this point, we'd like to open it up for questions in our audience. All right, okay. We have a.
Okay, that's okay. I can adjust my voice. I wanted to find out, thank you for this conversation, obviously so timely, for the elections. My question is, what do you see, I don't want to put this in just one generation, but what do you see Gen Z doing this time around, for this election? Just because they are they're hawkish in terms of like what they're seeing, and they are not afraid to be able to actually step up and take the reins as appropriate. Now, I don't want to use any generation, I'm here to support the generation. What do you see?
For the record, I'm not Gen Z, I'm millennial, so it's a big difference. But definitely, young folks are engaged. What we see is one of the big driving issues for a lot of young people is right now reproductive justice. We've seen that in many of our states that have ballot initiatives. That's something that is really moving them. What I would say, to take it a little bit back, if we get young people, young Latinx folks to vote, it would completely change the Latino electorate overall. Just because 44%, probably more, this is the statistics like 2 years ago, of the electorate are millennials and Gen Z. So if young people vote, it would change how this country looks, who's in office, the issues that we're moving. So what we do at Latinx is we first meet them where they are. We do a lot of work in the schools. We talk to them about the issues they care about, and then we do a lot of voter education. So all you need with Gen Zers is they love social media. So something we saw with the recent change of candidates is I don't know if you all were seeing that brat viral that went pretty big on social media. Everyone was asking, what does that mean? But young people started it, these trends in social media. We use social media for digital organizing to our advantage, will be good, but it's not enough to protest, it's not enough to post. We gotta make sure they're registered, and we've gotta make sure they have a plan to vote, and they take all their friends and make it a party. Because if young people vote, we'll be good. We'll be in the right direction.
Make it a party, TikTok. Yeah.
I just wanted to know, this is a question to you. So because each of you lead monolithic organizations that are primarily Black, African American, Asian, Latinx, because each of lead those organizations, and look at me, I'm asking you, because they each lead a monolithic organization, could you, to help the diversity of it all, to processing, every time you're talking to your group, do a yes and. So yes and the Latinx and the Asian should also, so that in your populations that you begin to put that on the brain to help, because you're talking about your largest organization, you were in the largest organization, and I know you're influential one. So imagine if the leaders of these organizations are talking about how we need to come together all the time, in addition to driving your initial issues. So that's my action.
I think, again, echoing, I think that is important for all organizations, right? And it's this balance of making sure each of us, while on the surface, they seem like they're monolithic organizations, are not. So if you look at Asians, right, there's Pacific Islanders who have a very different set of issues compared to than others in that subgroup. But I think just this discussion about the and, right, that's why our Ascend research started looking at, because we were coming across the data, and we wanted to give more context, and it's with the context about what's common, that's important, right? That prevents the silentness when we talk about even things like representation, for people to see actually the experiences when you get in a corporate standpoint further and further up is quite common, right? You talk to any of the groups, there's very, very similar issues, even though the roots of those issues may be different.
One of the things, to your point, I wanted to emphasize, Marty Castro of Casa Central and I co-lead 2/3 United. And it is an organization of Black and Brown organizations or leaders who lead organizations that serve primarily in our communities. And the point is that if we all get together, we're 2/3 of the population, and that makes a huge difference. And as a point of symbolism, but something that is meaningful, we each joined each other's boards. And I think that if we do that more, we really will demonstrate to each other that we're better together. And that's just something.
I have a question that I've asked you to come up here if you don't mind.
Hi everyone, my name is Nina Radman Ponce. I really like your perspective on, when you said this fight isn't for the weak, and I think that's a great point. Personally, I'm ready, I'm pregnant, send me out there. But I'm really concerned about my teams that I lead. You know, I lead a couple of boards, the people that I mentor. I think this is a very heavy mental load. So how can we take care of their well-being while encouraging them to be engaged? You know, if I see them getting burnt out, how do we help our, courage and our passion trickle down?
I think on that front, one of the things you have to make sure we're taking time to celebrate the wins, whatever you determine as the wins. Because if I said it was a long game, and it is, but if people aren't seeing progress along the way, it's easy for folks to give up. And that's even more so in a current society where we want immediate gratification, right? If all this energy and I don't see a change, people give up or they turn their attention to something else. So I think that's super important. And then as it relates to kind of our teams and just working with them, I think just really acknowledging that the work is heavy and also giving people time for breaks. So it's really important to make sure people do take that wellness time and pick time off, even if they're in a very critical role. And I think as leaders, we have an obligation to watch for those signs of burnout and identify it earlier so you don't actually lose good people that need the time to recharge.
These kids, shoes that are on the room. Yes, and I think there's so much power in one-on-one check-ins. I shared with you that we just had someone join the team a month ago, and you're going to talk about work stuff, right? You're going to talk about business stuff, but actually our last check-in, we talked about her, right? And how she's wired, how she thinks, and it was a powerful conversation. When you get to know people, that's really where you can work together and make some pretty magical things happen, right? If you don't get to know people, you're gonna miss out on that opportunity. That's why I always say when you introduce each other, like, hi, my name's Carlos, I'm Luis, DEI, that's it. There's so much more to me that we can connect on, and there's so much more to me that might not be part of you that we can learn from each other on. So that's why those connections with people actually, those moment of truth connections actually matter a lot. And it'll be amazing, like, but also be honest, right? Like, there's some people that if you check in with them, they're gonna appreciate it, and you're gonna talk, have a great conversation. There's some people that don't want anything. I need this money, I gotta pay my bills, I'm out, right? Just understand that there's people, and this is the DEI to me. There's people all over the range, right? And there's people that want to help out with this DEI space, right? And there's people that don't, right? And I tell people all the time, you can think all day long that you don't like people named Carlos with dark glasses and dark hair, right? But when you start behaving in that manner, that's when we have a discussion. That's when we have an issue. So yeah, just check. Really, there's power in checking in with people. And actually, after George Floyd, people should have checked in on all their Black and African American friends, right, and family. And actually, one of the great things that the Asian community did, I think it was after George Floyd. It was, I think, in Atlanta where they had the shootings, and I forgot what organization, but one organization just opened up a call like anyone can join. So I joined. I'm not Asian, but I joined, right? And it was just so powerful that community decided to come together, open the call, and anyone can join. And I still remember this person. She got on the phone and she's like, I'm at my company by myself, and I feel like no one knows what's going on, and I'm hurting. I do not want anyone at my firm to feel like that, right? I want to be there for that person. And that's what we need to do. We need to be there for those people that are by themselves, that they have no one to go to. Give them an avenue to connect.
I want to make a comment about this openness. And I know it's hard, right? When you're an organization that's focused on Latinx, Hispanic, Asian, Black, you have a tendency to say only people that look like that can identify. And actually, if we think that way, that's actually against the change we're trying to make. So what we've done is we make sure actually our employee base is diverse too. It's not representative of the broad population exactly, but I have Blacks on my staff, I have whites, I have LGBTQI+, they're not all Asians. Our membership base is completely open. I don't care actually where your orientation is, but you do have to understand if you show up at an event, we're gonna talk about issues that people that identify a particular way. And so some of our most loyal members, our most active long-term members, actually aren't Asian, they're not married to an Asian, they don't have Asian kids. But they, for some reason personally, right, for many reasons, identify with the work. And I think it's important for us as we build these organizations to also try to be inclusive, because it's been actually quite rich for us, especially in the last few years, as we continue to just be open about what staffing could be helpful and make sure we're bringing all those views as we create solutions. Again, I know it's not easy, especially if you're an organization that has to, let's say, meet bilingual skills, right? That segment's gonna be small. But I think we too can model what building inclusive organizations look like so that we're not challenged about, are we trying to block, right? Which is what the change we're trying to make.
Super critical to do that. You have another question? My question is gonna bring things back to affirmative action, which we lost. And I graduated in December last year, so I think maybe my brain's still in school mode, but so thank you. But my alma mater is on the news now. Amherst College reporters have seen a major drop in admissions of Black students from 11% to 3% after this new rollout of no more affirmative action. as well as a drop in Hispanic students, right? And I don't think it's gonna be the only one, it's not the only one, Tufts was on there. But we're gonna keep seeing it. And so my question is, right, like, how do we bring in DEI back to these schools, right? Because I think I'm not gonna blame it completely on biases, but they're just too scared on how they're going to be admitting their students. And there's no clear path to them, at least right now, on how to keep DEI, on how to make sure that their campuses are inclusive and diversified and equitable. And at Amherst College, because it's a student body of like 2,000 students. That's all there is at Amherst College. So a drop from 11% to 3% is very much seen and felt. And also in the more like civic engagement part, right, this comes from a decision of the Supreme Court that was majority from a decision of a president that was elected, right, and they served for life. So how can we begin to bring this DEI conversation? I know, career, you're thinking about like work stuff, but I think it all starts in the education that you receive and the place that you are in. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how we can continue that and bring this conversation to students that are at school right now, going to apply to schools, so that they continue the efforts on feeling included and have equitable opportunities.
Again, it's one of the reasons, one of the biggest reasons why we participate is because elections have consequences. You mentioned the SCOTUS decision, right, that opened the flood for now universities to, in a way, digress and instead of progress, and the both Latino and the Black community is suffering. But we cannot forget that I would say the real work always begins after election day, and that's holding our elected officials accountable. Like the rates that you mentioned are alarming. Like, why aren't we having conversations with elected officials, the school boards, like figuring out who's on these boards? Are they elected to serve on these like school boards? Something we have done recently on our climate work is we have been engaging on utility boards. If we want to transition into clean energy, well, it comes from a lot of direction comes from the top. So it's holding folks accountable, making sure we're participating and electing candidates that are going to be championing, making sure diversity is still a very core fundamental, issue that we elect folks on. So when they're serving, they're fighting for equality in the institutions, because we're not. Going back to previous questions, we cannot allow this to continue. We have to come together with other communities to make a public statement and definitely say that we won't stand for this. We won't stand for digressing.
And the other thing that I would add is the need to accelerate resources and amplification of the organizations such as ours, right? To, Access University Leadership Program or student programs, we want to make sure that students know about us and participating, so that at least they're able to build that support and programming through organizations like ours, and to Yadira's point, ensuring we're holding our partners in higher ed accountable as well.
I was gonna also say, getting involved in your alumni group, because alumni have a very large impact on universities, but also understanding how people are appointed to lead the university, lead the organization. And one of the things, because I read the SCOTUS decision from cover to cover, probably the recovering lawyer in me, but it did not prohibit you from looking at where people live, where they come from. There are other aspects of diversity that are not prohibited, that would lead to just as diverse of a student body. So when you get involved in those organizations and point that out to admissions, to college presidents, I think it's extremely important.
Thank you to the panel for such a robust discussion. We talked a lot about voting today, and I think voting is the floor of where we should be participating civically. So I wanted to hear the panel's thoughts on how we can support candidates when they declare themselves as candidates and they're pushing our, the progress we want to see. whether it's in the Latino community, Asian, Black community. And while the White House and Congress are important, I'm talking about the local electeds, right? We talked about school boards. Here in Chicago, we have ward aldermen, we've got state senators and state reps, even the governor. So how do we help support those candidates when they're ready? Because it costs a lot of money and you need a lot of people to knock on doors, make phone calls for you. So I want to hear the kind of thoughts on that. Thank you.
Ascend can't support candidates because of the way we are structured. And also, frankly, our membership is very broad, to the point about that. So any one candidate, I'm going to have an equal number of yays and nays from our membership. That said, we have many members who individually are doing a lot of work to work at a grassroots level to support candidates. And I think every community has different nonprofits that are there that are really mechanisms to fundraise and support or serve on issues. I think it's important to know what those organizations are and to the extent, right, channel people's energies to that. Just us as an organization, that's not in our mission and mandate, so we don't do anything around that front. But we encourage our members to, right, as individuals to drive that type of movement.
As somebody who depended heavily on donations, and prior to being an elected official, I just said, well, I give to church, right? I give to charitable organizations, so I'm doing my part. What I will tell you is no amount is too small. So if there is a candidate as an individual that you like, send them $10, send them $20, send them more if you can, because it absolutely matters. The other thing that I will say is when you send that money, it's like giving to the sweepstakes. They will keep coming, they will keep calling, and sometimes you do it, and sometimes you don't. But that is important. The other thing that I would say is hold them accountable. Act like that $10 is $10,000. And so when they get in office and they do something that you like, let them know. But if they do something that you disagree with, don't just call them out and call them names and say, oh, that's an ugly dress you have on social media. But talk specifically to the issue that you disagree with. And why? Because very often there's something you don't know about the process or about the policy that caused them to decide the way they did. And you may not agree with them even at the end, but at least you will understand.
I just wanted to add a few things, because the question was really good, and that's something that we often see is how are we that letter next again doesn't endorse parties or candidates. We work on engaging the community so they participate, because in a lot of these very important districts that are predominantly Latino voters, it does make a difference if they're registered or not registered, if they're informed or not informed. That often, causes someone their victory because folks didn't go out and vote. But what I would say is that we definitely need to encourage people to run. Because something we see sometimes is folks that don't come from a political background, people that often think, I can't do that role. Yes, you can. You don't have to have a legal background, a legal degree, and like some people think, oh, you need to have a JD, a lawyer, formal lawyer, in order to serve in government. No, you could be a teacher. You could be, a housewife. You could, be a young person. You can serve in various different positions that you don't need any qualifications other than just wanting to run. And then the second component, like they mentioned, is once we do get those great candidates, how do we ensure that they actually get elected? And it is a process, it is fundraising, but you need two things. You need votes, you need resources. And there are some organizations out there that do provide a lot of support. I'm gonna throw Latino Victory Project Foundation out there, Emily's List, there's Merge, there's a lot of different organizations that's their main mission. So definitely plugging in and connecting with those organizations to help you fundraise. So help you build a Canvas team. For folks that wanna run and they don't know how a Canvas team, I invite them to volunteer and serve as a canvasser, serve as a phone banker to see, get a lot of that experience under your belt. If, one day you do run, it's gonna help. And lastly, I would say a lot of our folks in the civic engagement space, they, do take that leap and it helps them tremendously knowing how to run a campaign. So volunteer, I'm putting my 2 cents there. If you all have time to volunteer and encourage folks to go, to vote and to run for office.
Thank you. One last question.
All right. Hi, thank you very much for all the work you do and the causes that you are forwarding. I just wanted to say that Project 2025 is something that I actually like because it is, I read the summary, it is so abhorrent and so hateful and it is a common enemy. And I think that as Americans, I think we rally around things that are going to impact us. And I think we can use it as a catalyst to really get people out the country and really get them to get out and vote. And so I wanted to ask you, how can we really try and really raise awareness of what it is and how it will impact us, not only personally, but our families and our communities? How can we do that?
Something that we've been doing about the Latinx is it is a lengthy document, it's like close to 1,000 pages. So no one really is gonna fully read the whole entirety, but we have been partnering with different organizations that have created already resources that are online. I can share also a website that we're working on developing that will have this information in Spanish as well, not just in English. Something we've been doing is making sure our Spanish media partners cover what's included in Project 2025, because our folks are very intelligent and wise, and they have their best self-interest and the interests of their families at heart. So once they are informed, it would really help us combat a lot of the misinformation. They're also being targeted through social media platforms. So that's in a way what we're doing at Mural is engaging Spanish media so they cover more stories and different parts of what's included in this much bigger blueprint.
Starting Monday, we have a newsletter that goes out to about 16,000 folks. If you don't get it, sign up for it. But we are going to have a snippet every week about what's in Project 2025. And so we know that different people care about different things, but I think you're absolutely right where to go. There is something in it for everyone to be concerned and gravely concerned about. So we want folks to know they are coming for you too. Whether it's Medicare, whether it is reproductive rights, whether it is the education you receive and the information that you get in that education, they are coming for you. So we want to explain it because that's one document that I won't read from cover to cover. But I know enough about what's in it to care.
Well, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists. And my ask is that we continue the dialogue, right? And we continue the conversation and sharing awareness. And we're going to celebrate, right? When we celebrate the wins, we make sure we're taking care of ourselves and checking in with one another. And our celebration is a beautiful mural that is waiting for all of us to see. And so I'll ask us to please follow our team members. Who are we following? Karina?